Hello, everyone. Welcome. So great to spend today with you. I'm Dana Lubner. I'm with Rent Responsibly, and I'm glad you're here for today's event, How Short-Term Rental Advocates Win and What to Do When You Don't. So whether you've been in the trenches of local policy fights or this is your first time even thinking about advocacy, I just want to let you know that you're in the right room. So we are co-hosting this webinar with our friends at VRNation, and I'm going to be your MC and moderator today. On the screen with me, you'll see a powerhouse of panelists of folks who've lived through some of the biggest advocacy moments in our space and who have generously agreed to share what they've learned. Before we dive in, I just want to share a couple housekeeping items with you. So as you can tell, and it's 2025 right now, the recording of this, it's a Zoom webinar, so your audio and your video are off by default, but the chat is open. So at any point, if you haven't already dropped in the chat where you're zooming in from, please let us know. But if you have questions, we are going to do our best to save time at the end to answer those questions. The session is being recorded, so the replay will be shared with you a few days after today's event. And then we've got some great resources at the end, so please stick around. So why are we here? And why does this conversation even matter? Because the reality is, if we wait for someone else to do what we're going to talk about today, that's the fastest way we lose. If you've ever felt frustrated about the attack on short-term rentals, you're in good company. You're not alone. Policies are changing faster than ever, often with little warning. And most hosts, probably not most of you all, but most hosts in general, they don't know how to respond until it's too late. So today's conversation is about turning that frustration and fear into momentum. So you're going to hear from the folks who've been in the thick of it. They've been organizing, they've been showing up, they've been taking action, and they've been shaping outcomes in meaningful ways. We'll talk about what's worked, what hasn't, how you can use storytelling and timing and tenacity to make a difference. So no matter where you are in your advocacy journey, you're going to leave here today with ideas and next steps that you can put into action in your own market. So before we dive in, I just want to quickly introduce you to who is bringing this conversation to us today. We, like I mentioned, have partnered with VRNation. VRNation helps hosts and managers level up their businesses through education, certifications, and real-world strategies. They also create space for connection from in-person events to networking opportunities and help elevate the professionalism of our industry across the board. And then Rent Responsibly focuses on the community building and advocacy side of the short-term rental world. We work with hosting communities to help them get organized, get a seat at the table. Of course, you guessed, I'm wearing my chair pin. In policy discussions and build connections and coalitions that really make an impact. You can think of us as the behind the scenes team that helps hosts move from the sidelines to shaping the conversation. So we've teamed up to bring you this event because we believe that stronger hosts make stronger communities, and that all starts with learning from each other. So now that you know who we are, we want to get to know who's in the room today. So we're going to launch a series of 3 poll questions, and we'd love your participation to learn a little bit about you. First question is, how would you describe your experience with short-term rental advocacy? There's no wrong answers, just pick one. We've got about 65% participation. So a few of you haven't answered. I love to get a 75% participation. All right, we're going to have to settle. Oh, we got 67%. Okay, awesome. I'm going to click end poll. So it looks like we have an incredible spread here, you guys. We have 25% of you said brand new, just here to learn. So welcome. 20% of you said getting involved here and there. 30% of you said actively engaged and showing up. And then 25% of you said a veteran who's been through the battles. I love to see the diversity of folks here with us today. All right, we've got 2 more polls. We can go to the next poll. And I'm going to play some music while we do it. All right, I'm content with, wow, I love it. We've got 84% participation. You guys are ready to be active. All right, so we've got right now, my local situation is 5% and pretty wide open, no real regulations yet. 36% of you said regulated, but fairly workable. 27% of you said tightening up and getting harder. And then 32% said under threat of major restrictions or a ban. I think that's great to hear because we have a diverse audience that will really pick up some great tips from today's panel. All right, and then our last poll, we are ready to go, and then we'll move on to our content for today. All right, what's the number one thing you want for your short-term rental community right now? All right, way to participate, guys. So it looks like the majority of folks keep what we have and protect it at 36%, make existing rules better at 18%, tied at 18% with build stronger relationships with decision makers. 23% of you coming in at second said get organized, start or grow an alliance. And then 5% said figure out where to even begin. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for sharing with us a little bit inside what's going on for you. And again, like I said, you're in the right room. All right. So let's meet today's panelists. So each one of these folks brings real world experience to this conversation. I'm going to keep the intros brief so we can get to the gold of today's event. But if I haven't met you before, I'm Dana Lubner with Rent Responsibly, but I also serve as president of my local association here in Denver, Colorado, Mile High Hosts. And then we did just become a local chapter of our state association called Colorado Short-Term Rental Association, abbreviated as COSTRA. So I've been in the thick of it, and I'm honored to be amongst these panelists to talk about some really important topics regarding protecting our industry. So now I'm going to move on to sharing with you a bit about who we have as our panelists today. We've got Orion Rogers. Orion is a seasoned host and advocate based in BC, British Columbia, where he co-founded the Property Rights Association of BC. With over a decade of short-term rental management, he became a leading voice during BC's regulatory battle. It was a big one. If you hadn't seen it, we'll hear more about that. But his passion for shifting the narrative around short-term rentals through storytelling, collaboration, and community advocacy is what made me want to invite him to be a part of today's panel. Next, we have Nicole Twig. Nicole is the owner of Kiwanda Coastal Properties and a founding leader of Oregon Coast Hosts. She's been organizing hosts along the Oregon coast and supporting advocacy efforts across the state. She brings deep experience in community building and civic engagement. Nicole serves on the VRNation Advocacy Advisory Board. Then we have Tyann Marson Hammond. Tyann is the president of the Missouri Vacation Home Alliance, a longtime short-term rental operator. She serves on the VRNation Event Planning Advisory Board and was just welcomed to the VRMA board. Congrats, Tyann. Honestly, I don't know how she does everything she does, but I'm so glad that she's here today to share her experiences with us. And then last but not least, this is someone I met newly over the last couple of months. He may be a familiar face to some of you folks, but someone that's going to bring a whole fresh perspective to today's conversation. This is Jeff Flint. He's the founder and the president of Hexacon Group and one of the most respected political and public affairs strategists in the country. With over 30 years of experience fighting and winning tough campaigns, more on that later, he's helped short-term rental leaders at the state and local levels navigate some of the highest stake policy battles. So we're so lucky to have him as part of today's panel. All right, so let's jump right into our panel discussion. Like I mentioned, there's going to be a variety of different perspectives, but what I've asked our panelists to do is really focus on areas where they've been really impactful in their communities with actionable tips that can be helpful for you all so you can bring some of these practices into your own advocacy and community building efforts. So, Nicole, I'm going to start out with you. It's a pretty awesome thing what you did. You raised $50,000 in just 10 days from over 200 local owners, which, let's be real, that's incredible. $50,000 in 10 days. How did you pull that off so quickly?
It was sort of, hi, everybody. I'm echoing. Did that stop? Okay. It was sort of pent up, sort of frustration. So the big fundraise was amazing and we were so thankful. But I think the biggest thing that I learned as a vacation rental manager and having been a vacation rental manager since like birth, almost, that it was engaging the RBOs in our community that I hadn't really ever worked with, because the people that hire us are the people that don't want to get engaged. That's why they hire us. I mean, that's how I always assumed. So I always assumed I was doing all of this advocacy work on their behalf. And when I started to engage with the RBOs, who were also very, very passionate and worried, it was pent up because it had been after a series of community meetings that I was on a board with to help guide a new ordinance, which was really freaking everybody out. So it was stress and anxiety over their properties and their property rights. And so by the time we were able to get organized, it was this pent up demand that really was, we were so thankful because we did a lot of work to get organized, but it did raise that money, and it all went to, lawyers in the end, which sucks. But at least it was sort of gave the government something to take us seriously. Like, we're here, we're organized. This many people are really concerned. We're not just, one or two big management companies or Richie Riches that, it's small family owned homes where the majority of our donors. And yeah, the battle was a hard fought battle, and I don't know if we won or lost or what, but the organizing and the passion, it was a big lesson. It was a big lesson for me to engage with groups that I hadn't previously engaged with, individually, which it's a lot of work, but to get that many people rallied and to connect with them. But I think that was the biggest takeaway, is get everybody, not just the professional managers or the businesses in your area that could be affected.
I love what you said when you kicked off this answer, Nicole, because I've been as in my role at Rent Responsibly and in my own role in leading local and state advocacy efforts, it's easy to assume that those with the biggest footprint or the most to lose or the most money are going to be pulling up a chair to have a seat at the table to help you start your statewide or local alliance. And I chat with leaders who are like, you know what we need is a couple more property managers on our board. And I say, yes, you should have a diversity of representation so everybody feels like their voice is part of your organization. But don't assume that the property managers are going to be the ones opening up their pocketbooks or donating their time for the cause. And I've seen in a handful of groups, some of the presidents of associations are actually the RBO, rent by owner, self-managed host that has a casita in their backyard, and they're donating hours upon hours to the cause, and it's an RBO. So I love that you said you had not previously looked at that segment and you were surprised at how participatory and engaged they were. That is amazing. So great answer to kick us off with this discussion. Tyann, this question's next for you. You took something that was super frustrating about raising property taxes in Missouri and turned it into actual legislative action. That's a really big leap. I think a lot of people wax and wane about their frustrations with what's happening, but are they actually doing something about it? And I just want to know, can you share with us, how do you get individual hosts to join forces and work towards a common goal?
So the tax changes started back in 2017. And as we all know, we don't talk much with other people as far as other property managers and other hosts. And of course, back in 2017, Facebook groups weren't a big deal either, where you could just go on and start venting and get a lot of feedback. But my unique situation is that I am actually competitors with the majority of my family. So my mom, my sister, two of my brothers, we all have our own vacation rentals in all the same places. So we directly compete against each other, but it also means we have a built-in support group where we talk to each other about the issues we're having. So when we realized, hey, it's not just one person having the property taxes go up, and it's like, well, why is yours? And we started digging into it and started talking to other people. And by 2023, it had gotten so bad that as we're talking to others, we're like, this has got to be taken care of, or we're going to be losing short term rentals, especially in the cities where they already have big regulations. And the people that were hosting, we're going to lose those too. And so the things we did was one, we started locally to figure out what that pain point was, and we've made sure to put our votes in the right place. So I even moved my voter registration to my county where my vacation homes are so that my vote would count there. So we recognized that pain point. We talked to others. We saw how widespread the issue was, and it was statewide. We had no idea that was so statewide. We examined the repercussions of letting it continue, and we realized how bad the domino effect would be. And so we investigated what it would take to remove this pain point, and then we began to communicate with others why this specific issue that we're going to tackle and what that domino effect was going to be, and then the consequences of not addressing it. We shared a plan what we would do, and then we found those key supporters and the advisors to help us walk this path, because it was the advisors and supporters that got us moving so smoothly. Well, it was lots of bumps, but appeared so smoothly on the outside because of how we aligned everything and worked together.
And those advisors and supporters, they may be in your mind to our attendees as um, planning department, city council, staff members. So the really key thing to highlight there is legislators can't know everything about everything. And that's why they have lobbyists. And the lobbyists help bring the important topics to their desk. But they will oftentimes assign staff or advisors to make recommendations. So, in addition to making relationships and building relationships with the policymakers, don't overlook the staffers, because they are going to be the people that are taking that first stab and making a recommendation. And you want to make sure that they know and see your face in their mind when they're making these recommendations. Awesome. All right, Orion, this one's up for you. So one of the things I think that you do really well is identifying needle movers. You know, those volunteers who don't just show up, but they really push things forwards. Probably the people we all wish we knew. How do you spot these people, and how do you get them set up for success to make an impact?
Yeah, I mean, it really resonates kind of with what Nicole was talking about with raising funds. And it starts with getting as many people in the room as possible, managers, RBOs, other people that are involved in the short term rental industry in some capacity. Obviously, if you have a stake in the industry, that's the best way to be motivated. But once you can get that many people in the room, managers and everyone, it's about kind of creating a moment of action mirroring action. You do have to be a leader. You know, you have to have that kind of leader drive to show that you want to do the work, that you want to make reach outs, that you want to make connections. And then as you're doing that, other people you'll see will naturally kind of gravitate into their roles. Some people are good with graphic design, and they'll start to say, hey, I could make a logo. And so as you start to see people, that was a very basic example, but as you start to see people put their hands up and kind of want to help, those are, they're naturally identifying themselves as people that want to help kind of be that needle mover. and drive the message or grassroots advocacy forward. I mean, it is all volunteer in the beginning, numerous hours. I'm sure I see everybody nodding their head. They all know that. And then once you can raise some funds, you can start to find a little bit of paid staff and paid help and outsource that work as well. But really trying to figure out, who has the drive, who has the connections, who has the relationships in place. Everybody's also had multiple jobs in their past. Some people may have worked in city staff or in municipal government or somewhere in some sort of spokesperson position. I mean, I like to talk, so I got nominated as a spokesperson right away, but we had people that were very helpful with web design, and those are the people that helped build our website instead of trying to figure out how are we going to put $1,000 or $2,000 towards website design. So it really comes down to your engagement with your community of hosts, getting as I can't say this enough, getting as many people in a room, and if you can do it in a physical room, all the better. Our start was having an STR managers meeting here on the island, where we actually were able to get about 9 STR managers all in the room together. And then you think about how many people those people have influence over in their host networks, and then bringing all of those people in. And we utilized a WhatsApp chat. That was our way of getting as many people into one room, communicating, creating that kind of dumpster fire of angry STR hosts with their pitchforks out, ready to point and create action, which is what Nicole talked about, was that catalyst moment to then raise a ton of money in a very short period of time. So
I love that. I think something that really stood out to me when I first met Orion, was they did some really creative guerrilla tactics, with the expertise and natural given skill sets of what their board had. So that's a key thing, is like, you need a treasurer, you need a secretary, you want to find out who's leading, but like taking the time to build those relationships and figuring out what lights these people up, because that's going to be something they can do and do with joy, versus like giving somebody the spreadsheet to analyze budgets and numbers when they should be out there kissing babies and shaking hands. Like, make sure you're well aligning people, and that you can't just assume that. You can give them a survey, you can give them like some sort of personality test and hope that you're placing them in the right place. But the relationship building on that front end is what's going to make them stick around and show up and support you and keep your back. I do want to do, Orion, a leader seminar with you and Suzanne, because the guerrilla marketing that they did with social media was phenomenal. So I know we don't have time to talk about that today, but it's on my wish list, trust me.
I'll just comment zone of genius. Try and identify zone of genius in your group, and
I
you nailed
love
it there. Find the right people that should be in their spot. Don't give the spreadsheet to the content creator.
Exactly. All right, Jeff, this next question is for you. So you often say that advocates need to know the end goal before picking their tactics. And you've seen what happens when that's missing. Can you walk us through how that played out in South Lake Tahoe?
Sure, happy to do that. So South Lake Tahoe 2024, November 2024, we were actually running a campaign against a vacancy tax. It was not directly an STR issue, but the twist on that is in 2018 in South Lake Tahoe, California, by voter initiative, STRs had effectively been banned. And that same group of anti-STR activists were now the people behind this vacancy tax. So though my client had hired me to run this anti-vacancy tax campaign, the sort of the remnants of the STR ban were still hanging over the whole community. Without going into a lot of details, the campaign against the vacancy tax was going very well. And in the course of that campaign, we had this external event happen, which is that the STR ban had been sued by the local owners and operators. The trial court had originally said, no, the STR ban is upheld. And then the appeals court in California said, trial court, I think you got that wrong. You need to take another look at it. And so that happens in the course of the campaign. We had a pretty good sense at that point that we were going to win the vacancy tax campaign. So I went to my clients and I said, you saw that court decision. This is going to come back, and it looks like we're going to win. It would be really cool if we could take some of this energy we've created around this anti-vacancy tax campaign and also change the makeup of the local city council so that if, as anticipated, we won the court case, the city council would not appeal the decision, and and the ban would be overturned. And they said, that's awesome. Let's do that. So we pivoted. Like I said, vacancy tax campaign we knew was pretty much won. So we said we can get two wins out of one here if we change our focus to changing the city council also, so that we would get to realize this coming court victory. So the point I would give to folks here, Dana, is you think about putting in your navigation system, your GPS. You have to say, where am I now? Where do I want to go? And then the GPS calculates that for you. It's the same thing in politics and public affairs. If you don't know what your end goal is, you can't come up with all of the strategies and tactics that you need. When do we need to hire a lobbyist? When do we need to do an economic study on how we contribute to the campaign? That's got to be feeding towards the goal. It can't be just, an economic study worked in South Lake Tahoe, so we should do an economic study in Ocean City, Maryland. Different circumstances, different results. You need to know where you're starting from, what your end goal is, and then the tactics and the strategies start to fall into place.
I love and am going to steal the GPS analogy, because you may hit a road closure and you got to
Right.
reroute, but you're still trying to go to your final destination, and there may be
Absolutely.
something that you did not predict along the way, and just know that that's probably going to happen. But to get so clear on where it is we're trying to go before we just start kind of running out into the community and hoping that each one of our individual efforts are going to be impactful, that's the beauty of working with a political strategist like yourself, or really just taking that time on the front end to be like, what is our goal and what can we settle with? And the thing I hear time and time again is, if you're going to say no, bring an alternative suggestion, or be prepared to find the micro win. So the destination may not be where you exactly hope to go,
Totally.
but if you're close within the vicinity, consider that a win. And that's really what helps us continue to do what we do in advocacy, because it's not all a slam dunk touchdown of a victory. So I really appreciate that, Jeff, and the insights that you provided there. Nicole, you're up for our next question. So you won a lodging tax fight by just 12 votes out of 9,000. That's razor thin. What does that kind of narrow victory teach you about voter outreach and mobilizing your community?
Yeah, it was amazing. It felt miraculous. Everyone sort of within our local advocacy board, and it affected the greater tourism community because it was all lodging. Although short-term rentals are 70% in our area, so I always throw that in there. But it was seen as kind of a no-brainer. Why? I mean, you guys have probably seen it. Why wouldn't locals vote to raise tourist taxes? It doesn't affect them. And everybody kind of gave up, and I was like, listen, guys, I I live here. I can see that the community is frustrated with the way things are. Anything that says new taxes, I feel like we can just spin it. We weren't allowed to spend money because of the way we had registered our original 401k. So we really just had to grassroots, like flyers, community meetings, Facebook posts. And we didn't really, I mean, the way that we spun it was, this promotes tourism. This tax promotes more tourism. That's what it's going to pay for, which it does. In where we are legislatively, a giant percentage of it has to go to promote tourism. So, do you want more tourism? This is what this is for. It was just the way we spun it, but it was really on the back end, a lot of like, guys, I can see where this is. It's a heated local election because of the school boards were all kind of going wonky. And I was like, it was a midterm election. I knew it was going to have more participation because of these weird local scenes that are going on. And I said, let's just keep fighting. Everybody wanted to give up. And I was like, let's just go to the meeting, print some flyers, we got some statewide organizations to back us with some websites. And it saved us from raising our lodging tax from 10 to 14% basically overnight, which would have even affected bookings we already had, which they didn't write it that way. So election night, I was like, it was just like 4 to 5 votes away every time I looked at it. And I've never been so personally invested, because it's a 40% tax hike. And it was amazing, that 12%. And it was helpful because our governing, people that drafted it, that were like, no brainer, we'll get money. It made them take a step back. Like, let's think about the industries that we're affecting. It's not just her, I think it really helped open their eyes too. So as much as we couldn't spend any money and they had funded PACs, not highly funded, but it's a small county, but we, yeah, it definitely empowered our group after some kind of considerable losses overall, keeping our group organized beyond those original losses and keeping everybody engaged. To tell your voters, tell your housekeepers or the people you work with in your property, keeping those original owners engaged was how we did it. And 12 votes was like a miracle. It was definitely thought it was like there was no way it wasn't going to pass. So big win.
It's a dopamine hit of the proof of grassroots advocacy. If I'm, I mean, there's nothing more empowering than being like, wow, when we use our voice collectively and united, we actually can make a difference. Even if it's a razor thin win, a win's a win.
I
So
think
that,
it was the only recount they had remembered doing in like 30 years in the county. They had a recount, so we had to have somebody from our organization go and watch the recount, which they were,
Oh,
to get it
yeah.
to 12. Yeah. And we were like, oh my gosh, it's a recount. I hope they did it right, but they did. So
God, talk about nail biting. That is
yeah.
incredible. Congrats to you guys on that. Tyann, you've been working to build the Missouri Alliance into a model for other states. What's been your biggest challenge in creating a strong statewide short-term rental association?
Our biggest challenge has been gaining the trust of people because a lot of folks have tried to build organizations before and they fizzle out, or you donate money to something and you're like, are they really going to use our money, our resources that are already thin for us, especially in an economy like this, and use it for what they say they're going to use it for? So building that trust from not just people that are hosts and property managers who would be members, but also the trust from our supporters. So that would be like your industry suppliers or the community. I mean, your loan officers, your realtors, and then your legislators as well. So we had to prove that we are knowledgeable of and we understand the issues that we're all facing within our state, that we value the viewpoint and the input from everyone, that we're not just running it one way. It's, hey, we're going to take it in, we're going to listen, and that we were truly here to serve others. It wasn't something, hey, let's just put these people on the board and they're the big shots and we're going to upload, put them on a pedestal. It's like, no, we're here to serve all of you. And then we had to prove that we can manage the resources that we're given, not just the ones now, but for the future. And that's both monetary and human. And then lastly, that we will do what we say that we will do, that we will have that follow through. In the beginning, when we first started with the legislation, there wasn't many people who were invested in it as far as money and time, but that's been almost 9 months ago. And now within that time, we're at nearly 100 members that are paid members of MOBA, besides the support of all kinds of industry suppliers. And just today, we got the support of VRMA as well for MOVA. So it is just incredible that when you walk the walk, not just talk the talk, and you can prove the trust, that everything goes according to what you need.
Mm. Love that so much. It's so easy as a leader on a board to lose sight that you know what's happening behind the scenes. But unless you're telling people and communicating to people repeatedly, because not everyone's going to open your newsletter, not everyone's going to see your social media posts, what you're doing, you don't have that trust. So communicate, 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 build that trust is like the golden, never can we ever forget that rule here. Because people will renew their membership or they'll open their pocketbooks when they feel like they can trust who they are donating or purchasing a membership from. Congrats on the VRMA grant or the donation. That's fantastic. You guys have been doing some incredible work. And your leadership team at the helm makes the world of difference on the energy that ripples out through your communication, the events you organize, the way that the public perceives the work that you're doing. So congrats to you all and everything that you've been doing and building in Missouri. Orion, your court case in British Columbia did not go the way we hoped. So I know that can be incredibly defeating. It was long and drawn out. how did you keep people motivated before and after the legal battle and the political setback that you had to go through in BC?
Yeah, great question. Really, really tough to go through. I mean, I think about what I tell my kids, when they fall down, you have to get back up. You have to keep pushing forward. It's just like any business, any entrepreneur venture, you can't quit. If you believe in it and if it's for the greater good and it's for helping businesses and helping people, then you have to keep driving forward. And, in terms of how do we keep the momentum? How do we keep engagement? It really is engagement, connecting with all of your members, connecting with all of your secondary stakeholders, being loud in the community as much as possible. I mean, it's a game of headlines. It really should be, because the more that you can be in the news, the more that you can be in traditional media, positive or negative, you're keeping that a lot, keeping that conversation alive. And so, how did we deal with the setback of our challenge being dismissed? Well, we did another round of fundraising. We looked at the funds that we had, and we've appealed that decision in court. And of course, like I think Nicole said, a lot of the money is going to lawyers at this point, but that is how big businesses fight, as they fight in the courtroom, and they fight with consultants or lobbying teams. And so making sure that you have the right team, that you are paying for, that your funds and resources are going to the right strategic partner to help keep that message driven forward is so important. And what we do is we just really do our best to keep up with our newsletters, to keep up with our day-to-day engagement and chats, sharing information, talking about what little wins or which wins we do have in what areas, and really pushing those up and promoting them as much as possible. And just trying to be there, any opportunity that you can have to comment on a short-term rental topic in your community in a public setting is the best platform that you can have. And keeping your sound bites as you know con- concise as possible and consistent as possible, because if you think about how housing strategy, and the lobbying team from the Hotels Association, they're always just using the same rhetoric. They're saying it over and over again. So making sure that you're doing that same thing keeps all of your members engaged and keeps you kind of pointed in the right path of where you're trying to get to.
Mm. So many good things in there, Ryan. We're rooting for you guys. And it's, if you can share in 30 seconds, like what happened and for BC, for anybody that wasn't watching that, I think it would be great for people to know the context of what might is needed in order to fight something that can be so detrimental to a short-term rental community as such as yours.
Yeah. So what happened? I mean, I'll use this for U.S. terms because Canada, U.S. So in our cities, in our little townships and communities and counties, we all had short-term rental regulations in place that were working, but the state, or province for us, came in with an overarching short-term rental legislation that essentially put all short-term rentals, except for a few areas, back into a principal residence category. So you have to live in your home. You can only rent out your home while you're away. They did say that you can use secondary units or additional dwelling units, but in many of the municipalities, those units were not allowed to be used as short-term rentals. So in conjunction between municipal regulations and state or provincial regulations, they really like chokeholded you to really only be able to, offer your home when you're not in it and not utilize the second property. And what we did is we challenged that, saying that, it was an infraction of property rights, that the legislation was overarching. And what happened was it was dismissed in court. Not The challenge was never met head on. They dismissed our way of coming to the court. So they used, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit kind of mentality on that, which is really unfortunate. And that's just the way that the law system can be played. And they were able to get our court case dismissed, that we arrived to court too early before the state had issued fines on their new legislation. So very sneaky tactic. So we're appealing that to get it back down to the regular courts, and so we can go through the process again. I believe our appeal date is in October, so we're coming up really quickly here.
Well, we're rooting for you, and it just shows the value of having somebody that understands the inner workings of how all these processes works. And when you think about keeping volunteers motivated, knowing when and how to pick the right lobbyist or political strategist or attorney, Because some people will say, have a lobbyist year round, and that can be a waste of money. For other communities, they maybe need a lobbyist year round. So we did I Rent Responsibly, a leader seminar called, I think, The Art of Advocacy. It was last year at the beginning of the year, where we talked about that exact topic, when to hire and when to know it's time, and when to say, like, let's not just try to figure this out ourselves, because going alone at something as monumental as this is going to set you up for failure. So bravo to all of the passion, energy, and work you've put into your campaign. Jeff, we've got a last question coming to you before we do our rapid fire round. Jeff, you not only are a political strategist, but you lead as the executive director at the Newport Beach Group in California, and you focused on growing membership before a crisis hit. Some of us think, okay, that's crazy. How are you going to motivate members to buy a membership before they're living in fear? But why is this important to organize early, and how do you motivate people to get involved when everything seems calm?
It's a great question, and we're there, to be honest, learning the challenges of that. That engagement came out of, funny you mentioned it, out of a presentation I had made at VRMA a couple years ago, I think, where I had talked about a couple of STR fights we'd had, and then encouraged people in the room to get organized before they were in the thick of it, because it would give them a better chance of being successful. And somebody in the audience, the largest STR property manager in Newport Beach, was in the audience and took me up on it, called me up and said, "Hey, I saw your presentation at VRMA. I want to form an alliance here because I feel like we're headed in a bad direction with the city, and we need to get organized early, just like you were saying at your presentation." So what we've first of all, having one visionary, leader in a STR community like that, who sees the problem coming and is really motivated, is very key. And so Aaron Batley with Newport Beach Vacation Properties in Newport Beach has really been the driving force, got me on board. What we've tried to do to get people to understand that they're may be headed towards a problem is a combination of showing incremental progress with the city, showing little hints that we're seeing that a problem may be brewing on the horizon. And then also another thing we do there is we post daily on the blog for the Newport Beach Short-Term Rental Alliance all of the other threats that other STR communities around the country, and in some cases around the world, are seeing, to show them that the anti-STR activists are out there everywhere, and you may not see it today, but they're coming for you one day, and you've got to be ready for it. So we've done in-person meetings. We've lured people to membership development meetings with free lunches that Aaron has paid for, to his credit again. Obviously, some of the blocking and tackling is any community that has robust registration. Those lists are generally, at least in the United States, public record. So you can go pull that list and email and mail those people and ask them to join. But I mean, it's really a combination of all the motivations. Why do people join an alliance? A lot of times it's because you're in a fight, you're about to be banned, or you just got banned, and what do you do about it? In other cases, it's highlighting the threats on the horizon. Also, people like senses of community. So some of it's just been get to know your fellow STR owners better, and build your professional network within the community. Sometimes it's, we can get you, uh, a monetary benefit, a discount on a good or a service that you use through, if you're an alliance member. We made a partnership with the local chamber where we promised to direct STR guests to chamber member restaurants and shops in the community, and in return, they made a grant to the alliance to help get it kicked off. So it's really all of those kinds of things. But I think the number one is ultimately communicating to people that the threat is out there. If you think it's not coming for you in your community, you just haven't experienced what Nicole and Orion and Tyann have already been through, and telling that message and being consistent on it and growing the membership over time and having that commitment to do it over time.
Yeah, I think the key thing is, I mean, you can say it to everybody. It's so much more of a balanced mental state physically, emotionally, all of the things for ourselves to be in a proactive state than reactive. Like future you will be so glad that we organized and we launched and we started raising funds now before we have something that's going to be so much more expensive because we didn't have the infrastructure in place. Share this web recording with your community and say, listen to these people. These are the people that literally, you know, you don't want to wish you started sooner. And this is a chance for us to be doing something for future us. So I love those tips, Jeff. So now we're going to go on to rapid fire questions. I'm going to go Nicole, Tyann, Orion, then Jeff. Answer in like a sentence or two, if you don't mind keeping it brief. Imagine someone is watching today's webinar. They want to take their very first step towards getting more involved. What would you tell them to do? Nicole, you're up first.
Brief. I'm really torn, so I'll try to be brief, but I really like Jeff's think about the end goal, because that's really hard sometimes. Like we're fighting caps, we're fighting transferability, we're fighting, extra fees and extra time. Anyway, so like which one of those it kind of come up with that's most important, these big picture. But I also really like the sort of personal like branding. So like get your owners to, like I had an owner donate a case of wine. He's a winemaker, and I donated it to the chamber auction. And I was like, make sure they know this is from a short-term rental owner that supports the chamber. Little things like that that puts a face and like humanity behind what is often a, big rich person with big fancy house. Like, no, they're raising money, like little things like that, coming into meetings and saying, oh, I have a short-term rental owner that has, just constantly advocating that these people care about the community that they own property, because I think that's the biggest thing that gets lost in most of these fights. So not brief. I'll be quiet now.
All right, I think I had next on mine, Tyann. I can't remember the order I said.
Yeah, so my tip is you need to go out and meet every single one of your legislators on every single level and start those relationships and let them know who you are and what you do. We did not have a Senate sponsor for our bill until myself, my husband, my brother, my mom, and one other person walked into his office in the Senate building and said, Senator Brown, this is our problem. Here's the information. And the next day he said, I will sponsor the bill. It takes that face to face at every single level. My parents' chiropractor is now a representative, and he voted for it because he knew the people, and therefore he had more understanding about it.
Gold. All right, Orion.
Yeah, this is a game of communications, and your external communications strategy will fail unless you have a very smart internal communication strategy. So I am a strong believer in pulling your whole network in as close as possible and having as much natural daily communication and conversation with them. That's everybody in the short-term rental network that you can reach, getting them all into an area like WhatsApp, and then coming up with actionable steps, and then using that for your external communication strategy so you can point it in the right direction. And you follow up on like what Tyann said, is like making sure you're reaching out to and having face-to-face communications with every single person at every level of government. But you're not going to have a game plan in place unless you start at the center with who is involved, and then creating those needle movers, and then moving outwards from that.
Awesome. Jeff, over to you.
Sure. Well, first, if I can, I'm going to double down on what Tyann said, is know your policymakers, because they are the ones that that will be making these decisions on life or death for your businesses and your properties. And I'll take that maybe one step further. So I'm not just saying ditto, is understand the political environment in which you're operating. So not only know those policymakers, but know what their motivations are. Quick example we did the unban in Anaheim several years ago, and we picked up on the fact that the elected officials were getting overly influenced by the same 20 anti-STR activists that went to city council every other week. And we knew we had to take the conversation out of that room and back into the neighborhoods. And because we knew the reality is that most of the STRs in Anaheim were well run and had good relationships with their neighbors. So we needed to show these council members what you're hearing in the council chambers is not reality. Go talk to the neighbors of the STR homes and find out that they're well run. So know them, know the policymakers, number one, and then know what their motivations are and how you can provide them new information, new facts, new interactions so that you can change the narrative to something that is more aligned with your policy goals.
Strategy. As we say,
Strategery.
chestnut checkers, guys. And that's what we're here to help you with. So we're gonna kind of skip over the Q&A because I didn't see one other than from Jennifer in the chat. But we're gonna continue this conversation. I know VRNation has a network where they'll be sharing the recording. Rent Responsibly has a network where we'll be also posting the recording. We have a group called the STR Community Builders Group, and I just feel like there's so much more to this discussion than we have time for. And I don't know about you all, but I love these types of conversations, and it's so inspiring because you can only keep so many strategies in your mind at once. And then you connect with someone and you're like, oh my God, we should do that. Or let's keep that in mind for the future. So I think there is such beauty in building community here. Jennifer did ask, we want to work on what a successful message, excuse me, we want to work on what is successful messaging to fight the rising registration costs we face. We have not found our storytelling to be too successful this far. We're trying to fight the narrative of us as greedy renters. And I'm just going to take that question myself because I've been in this fight and I know what has been helpful to move the needle here. Another great resource, because we don't have time to dedicate solely to this topic, we did do a leader seminar. If you go to the R network, it's called Data-Driven Storytelling. And it's about how to take data and marry it with your storytelling. Because when you bring data, which is facts, and then you bring the emotion of your story, it makes it irrefutable. Somebody cannot just say, look at this is someone who's just emotionally worked up and God, I'm going to scroll on my phone and ignore this. But when you present data and you say, look at the other registration fees across our state, this is exorbitant. Or, ask the right questions. What are we solving for? Where is this money going to go towards? But bringing in the stories and also the right stories. So find the housekeeper, find the single mom who's cleaning 10 properties, find the individual who has something that's emotionally compelling. So don't neglect that emotional storytelling, but gather the data. Find the data that's going to be that needle mover for you, and then marry those two together to have the biggest impact on changing the narrative. So as we wrap, I'm going to go back to our screen share. Thank you so much to our panelists. I don't know about you guys. Like I said, I could talk about this stuff forever, but if you're fired up and you're thinking, okay, where do I even start? We've got you covered. I want to make sure I'm showing the right screen. Diane, can you confirm you see want to take action? Cool. So Rent Responsibly has a ton of free advocacy toolkits, resources, step-by-step guides, templates, examples, articles. It's a massive library. So anything you're struggling with, add it into a keyword search and you'll probably find a resource. If that resource doesn't exist, let us know and we'll build it for you. So you can scan the QR code on the screen so you can see our full advocacy toolkit. And then if you're thinking about organizing something in your area or you want to bounce questions off me, you can schedule a call with me or reach out to me directly at dana@rentresponsibly.org. I think we're dropping my link in the chat. Like you can go to HubSpot, get on my calendar, happy to chat with you. The main message we want to share with you is that you don't have to figure this all out alone. And then before we close, I wanted to share something awesome. VRNation is offering 25% off memberships for attendees today. This is a fantastic way to plug into their growing community. So in addition to that, for anyone planning ahead to 2026, which for me, that still sounds crazy, their next national event is coming to Denver, where I live, in April of 2026. So it's shaping up to be an incredible gathering of hosts, managers, and short-term rental leaders from all over. I attended their last 2 conferences. They were fantastic. They definitely put the fun into the conference feel. So you can scan that QR code or head over to vrnation.com to learn more. All right, folks, that's a wrap. Just want to say thank you to our panelists for being here today. You guys are in the trenches. You're fighting this every day. We could not be doing what we're doing to help protect our industry without each and every one of you. And thank you to everyone in the audience for spending this hour with us. The one request I would ask of you is share this replay with your boards, your communities, your friends, your networks, your property managers, your hosts. Share this. Let's not let this just sit in our inboxes. Let's make sure that this session lives on and grows legs and makes impact. So make sure to stay connected with VRNation and Rent Responsibly. Please follow that spark. Keep the fight going. We need folks like you to show up. We need you speaking up. We need you stepping up. And I just want to say thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week, everyone.